Right, well, we're taking a walk down memory lane to begin this Wednesday's edition of the SportsMax Zone, revisiting a time when the sport that unites our region was still referred to as lovely cricket by the people of the Caribbean. In a rescue act worthy of a captain, Clive Lloyd produced his lone one-day international century almost half a decade ago, now pulling the West Indies to what proved a winning total of 291 for 8, batting first against Australia in the inaugural World Cup final at the iconic Lord's Cricket Ground on June 21, 1975. Lloyd's 85-ball 102 along with his 1 for 38, Rohan Kanai's 55 and Keith Boyce's 4 for 50 led the Caribbean side to a thrilling 17-run victory over the mighty Aussies in cricket's first true one-off showpiece. Well, there is much context, historical and social, still to be added to what could have been described as this cricketing region's fairy tale, likewise in the sport, and one man intends on providing it. He's our cricket analyst, Fazir Muhammad, and he joins us now via Zoom to share a lot more. Faz, I'm so happy I'm starting this segment because I had a lot of questions for you. And I mean, let me start by saying, so pleased that you could join us to talk about this today.
Yeah, good to be on the show, and this time in engaging in something different rather than cussing everybody around. I'm actually engaging in shameless self-promotion.
Well, let's see, because I feel like you'd find a way to curse whoever needs to be cursed, but let's see. So we're talking about this time when, you know, cricket was doing very, very well. You know, we were at the peak of it, and you know, there's so much now fast to reflect on it, right? So I sort of just gave a synopsis when I did the introduction, but can you share with me, like, and I said it to Lance at the top of the show, the climate, you know, like what was taking place at that point in time? Can you remember, like, what was the atmosphere like when it comes to cricket? Like, who were the stars apart from Sir Clive Lloyd and that historic thing that he did and Rohan Kanai and company, but just for like the younger generations that are tuned into this show, can you paint that picture for us?
Well, I was only 10 years old at the time, but I mean, growing up, you were really absorbed with cricket because we were talking about a very different time from now, not just in terms of the team's performance, but there were very few distractions. You had football, of course, and I'm sure in many other territories there were different avenues as well, track and field in Jamaica, very famously. But essentially, even if you didn't want to, you were aware of something called West Indies cricket. You would be aware of people talking about the West Indies team, this World Cup, and I remember fondly listening with my father, who was since passed on, to the radio commentary in that nail-biting finish against Pakistan when I was supposed to be in class studying for common entrance examinations, then to the final to listen to Clive Lloyd belting the ball to all parts, and then several weeks later watching the highlights on television. It was really a time when you took it for granted that cricket was number 1, 2, and 3, certainly in our part of the Caribbean, and the fact that the West Indies would win that World Cup against Australia with established stars, with rising stars like Viv Richards, Gordon Greenidge, Andy Roberts, the evergreen Rohan Kanai, Clive Lloyd, as you mentioned, and so many other names. It really just seemed to be, one, a culmination of a build-up to this tournament from a West Indies point of view, but also an introduction to a period for about 20 years when West Indies cricket was at its most dominant. So yes, even if at the age of 10 you didn't appreciate all the subtleties and nuances about the game, you certainly were aware that this was certainly the #1 event happening at the time.
Yeah, and Faz, you know, I know because of you know, the work that you would have done in your career so far, you are going to, you know, be a part of, you know, ensuring that you commemorate this occasion. So can you tell us a bit about, you know, how you're getting involved and a bit about the articles and everything?
Yes, indeed. Because it's 50 years, June 21st, 2025, if we're all around, God willing, it's going to mark 50 years, which is a golden anniversary, which to me is a significant occasion. Yes. I've collaborated with one of my media colleagues here in Trinidad and Tobago, Lana Libert, who is a very forthright, independent journalist in his own right, who has a website called wired868.com. And what we're going to be doing is presenting a countdown to June 21st. It's going to be a 50-day countdown starting on May the 2nd, which is next week, Friday, which incidentally happens to be Brian Lara's 56th birthday. That's purely coincidental. I was just counting back 50 days from June 21st and ended up on May the 2nd. And every day leading up to June 21st, which will be 50 days, there'll be a different article focusing on that World Cup with the many different angles, many different avenues, the players, of course, the build-up, the history of one-day cricket, how did it come about, the growth of the game, and so many different elements that will be tied into it. And I hope that what it does, if nothing else, generates a bit of discussion, a bit of interest. Maybe people might want to say, look, you got this completely wrong. You missed the point on this. You're totally wrong in this perspective. But even if it generates that sort of dialogue or criticism, if it happens to be, I think it's useful because we just seem to have abandoned so much of a glorious history that is West Indies cricket.
So, Faz, you talk about these articles. I know I'm counting down the days as well to start seeing these articles. But, you speak about the rich history, so I'm going to think that, there's enough content to put out every day. Because when I think 50 days, 50 articles, it's one event we're talking about. So, in terms of, the presentation of the article, so it will only be available on Wired 868. And can you just give us just a sneak peek, because I know you probably started already, about the different themes that will be available for us to read about?
Sure. And again, it's no trade secret. It's just that there's so much to talk about, not just the cricket itself. Because you're right. Some people might say, 50 days about a tournament that lasted 2 weeks, about a final. What could there be in that? Well, one of the things that will come up immediately is that the 1975 World Cup was not the first global cricket tournament. But as people would say, peddling something, you'll have to wait to check the website to get the answer. You might also find it interesting to know that who were the players leading the batting and bowling averages for the West Indies after that 1975 World Cup. It might not be the names that you'll think of automatically. And also, if you were to think back, of course, West Indies won the first World Cup in 1975, the second in 1979. So it's only natural to think that there would be a handful of players at least who would have 2 World Cup winners' medals. But I wonder how many people can name all the players who would have 2 World Cup winners' medals for the West Indies from 1975 and 79. But that's just a snippet, because the intention is, as I've been doing over the last few days, to go through a narrative that sort of makes us aware of how one-day cricket came into being at the domestic level, not in England, again, as some people may think as automatic that the first limited over cricket might have been played in England. It's not so, but again, we have to wait and see what the story unfolds from May the 2nd. But after that, we go into profiles of the individual players, the 14 players in the West Indies squad. There might be a surprise name or two there in it. And then different elements, the interest in the tournament. How did it come about? Why was it slotted in as it was in early summer in 1975? And then, of course, the matches themselves, not just the West Indies matches, but the other matches of the 1975 World Cup. And then the final itself. And now I've realized I'm going to have to ask Lasana's permission for this, that after describing the final, which I hope to do, and I'm not going to be describing it in my own words, but the words of maybe a Reds Pereira, who was someone who was probably the lone surviving member of the TMS radio broadcast team from that 1975 World Cup. Surely his views would be very interesting. The writings of a Tony Cozier, the legendary one himself, will be part of the narrative. And I'll probably have to do a bit of an aftermath for a few days after June 21st to do justice to this great occasion.
Yeah, and Faz, you may pay tribute to a couple of the players in that winning World Cup team that are no longer with us, Roy Fredericks and Keith Boyce.
Absolutely, and indeed, that is the intention as well, Lance, because when you think about these players, they've faded into history. We don't, certainly from my understanding of it, I'll happily be proven wrong if that is the case, whether in our educational system, certainly not Cricket West Indies, which is a joke by itself, but we'll leave that for the moment, even if there'll be sort of a halfway commemoration with the Australians coming here for a test match, but that in itself is a talking point for another time. But people like Roy Fredericks, people like Keith Boyce, who played key roles. I mean, Roy Fredericks hooking for 6 in the first over of the final and falling onto his stumps off the bowling of Dennis Lillee. That was so trademark Fredo. And then Keith Boyce, someone who burned the candle at both ends, whether on or off the field, picking up 4 wickets, and the sort of player that he was, sadly passing away at the age of 53 on his birthday in 1996. Fredo succumbed to lung cancer some 25 years ago. So yes, they will certainly be the focus of attention, but every single player who was part of that squad, even those who didn't bowl a ball or face a single ball, are going to get a mention, because I think it's important to place it in a historical context that people can understand the facts, but also the perspectives. And that's where I think there might be a few differing opinions to what I might present, because people might have very different views of either the cricket itself, the players themselves, or the perspectives that I hope to offer.
Yeah, and Faz, I know that Lana Libert is one of the most highly respected journalists in Trinidad and Tobago. His Wired868.com website, fairly widely read. I look at that website fairly regularly. But what sort of readership do you expect the website to have during this period? And I would suspect that because of this project, it may get a lot more viewership than it previously had or has on a consistent daily basis.
Well, I would hope so, because again, the idea is, and the reason I asked Lana for his permission, really, because I mean, I'm clueless when it comes to these things about setting up a website or a blog or whatever it is, whatever you call it. I'm useless in that regard. And he was kind enough to listen to what I had to offer, and agree to put it on. And we'll see. It might generate a bit more interest. It might not generate as much as we might hope. But the idea is that it will create an avenue, or at least a forum, for some sort of discussion and interest, not just in West Indies cricket now, which is relevant, obviously, but the West Indies cricket of previous years, of previous decades, and how we got to where we are, and how we got to 1975. And indeed, I think Lana has shown over the years, I mean, the mere fact that he gave up a permanent job in the media to establish this website, and the sacrifices that he went through, that I know only too well, the financial sacrifices, tells me that he is someone, love him or hate him, who really has a burning desire to do justice to the profession, the vocation of journalism, which is why his perspectives on football, especially, very, very detailed, very intense, very straightforward, very forthright in many ways. And it's really a privilege for me to be allowed permission to be on his website starting the series from next week, Friday.
Yeah, and Faz, we are happy to be able to promote this project that you're embarking on, because I agree with you. It is very important that people understand the history. And as you just referenced, the fact that some of these players are almost forgotten, and the work that they did, we as media people need to do what we can from our standpoint to keep a lot of these things visible. I saw in the last 24 hours the outstanding Australian opener Keith Stackpole dying, and we remember the huge battles that Stackpole had as an opening batsman against a ferocious West Indies fast bowling attack. He passed away yesterday, didn't he?
Yes, he did, and it's one of the classic lines from West Indies cricket from that time, because Utan Dow of Jamaica was the big fast bowling name at the time. He had come to the fore just a year before, and there was tremendous anticipation. And Stackpole took him on to the extent that someone in the stand said, "Hey, Utan Dow, have you heard the 11th commandment? Thou shalt not bowl." So again, there's so many stories attached to it, and I don't think we've even scratched the surface. And as you mentioned that, Lance, let me give credit to Philip Spooner,
Yes.
who's been the media man for the West Indies for a long, long time. He's no longer in that role. And he's working very hard to remind people of significant milestones. Because remember, in November of last year, we were talking about the 50th anniversary of the Test debuts of Gordon Greenidge and Viv Richards in India. Well, I would say, Lance, that this to me, and pardon the pun because of the golden anniversary, is really a golden opportunity for any media house or any enterprising individual to latch on to this period, because essentially from now, for the next 20 years, it's going to be golden anniversary after golden anniversary, because the West Indies from 75 to 95 achieved so much, so many great deeds, so many world-class players who will not only be deserving of being remembered, but will offer us the opportunity to look back on the great squad of the 60s, which again, many people don't seem to realize that was there with Sobers and Hall and Griffith and Kanai and Seymour Nurse and Conrad Hunt and Worrell and so many others, and even before to Headley and the 3Ws and company. So it hopefully, and maybe I'm getting carried away, but even if others take it up to recognize that this thing called West Indies cricket, which marks its centenary in Test cricket in just 3 years' time, it's just milestone after milestone, Lance, and it's really up to us, not just the media, but the cricketing public and the general public of the Caribbean to latch onto these things.
Yeah, and thanks again, Faz, for joining us for this segment, because I think it is something that we must make our viewers aware of. And the 50-day countdown to the anniversary of the West Indies World Cup triumph in 1975 at Lord's in England. Guyanese playing a major role in that tournament, apart from Clive Lloyd leading the team, Roy Fredericks, Alvin Kalicharan, also key members of this team. And Roy Fredericks, as we had said earlier on. So the Guyanese celebrating first-class championship success. I think a lot of them who may not have been around in 1975 will appreciate the reminiscing and the detailed reenactment of this glorious occasion for West Indies cricket, which I am 100% sure, Faz, that you will do an excellent job of portraying to the readers.
Well, I'm starting to sweat already because you're putting me under pressure. But let's wait and see how it goes come next Friday on Wired 868 as we start the 50-day countdown. And as you mentioned, the Guyanese contribution, not forgetting the evergreen Rohan Kanai,
yes,
who played only because Sir Garfield Sobers was injured and couldn't play in the tournament. So Sobers was hoping for a swan song, and it turned out to be Kanai's opportunity. Yeah,
he had a big 149-run stand with Clive Lloyd in that final to resuscitate the West Indies as they had stuttered a little bit at the top of the innings. But Faz, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll be in touch. And I don't think that this is going to be the last time we'll be talking about this 50-day build-up to the anniversary of the West Indies 1975 World Cup triumph. Thanks, Faz. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks very much, Lance.
Yeah, and you were 100% correct there, Mariah, because you did suggest before we spoke to Faz that he may not have been able to avoid cussing someone, and he did take a bit of a jab at West Indies cricket administrators a few minutes ago. So you know Faz well.
But you've been working with me. You know I'm always right. Come on. Why are you surprised?
I'm not surprised.
We're
I'm
up
just
on a
making
break.
an observation.
Yeah, and I'm right again. Producer wants a break time.